Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I have a crafting guide for the Corvid Conspiracy. So let's go ahead and get right into it. First we're going to want to talk about setting up. So our initial plot that we get, assuming we're setting up an ad set, our initial plot should be in a clearing that we can use to craft one of the cards in our starting hand. We're going to need to craft many improvements and items to have a chance at closing the game. We're also not going to want to bother the table. We want to plot in clearings that do not jeopardize enemy interests, especially early in the game. Ideally, we plot in unoccupied clearings, so enemies have to move in to battle or attempt exposure. We need to avoid heat or attention for being a threat from the table for as long as possible while crafting as much as possible. If necessary, we're going to remind opponents that our scoring can be interrupted at any time, and we can point to another threat that can't say the same thing. Right, so Corvids, their scoring is very transparent. All the points that they can potentially score are out there on the table, right, because they can score from their plots flipping, which we know exactly how many they can score for, since they're on a one-turn delay before they can be flipped. We know which items can potentially be crafted because those plots are also crafting pieces, and then we know which cardboard they'd be able to access as well, so we can see literally all the points that Corvids have available to score to them, so we can remind opponents that there are other factions where this isn't the case. Let's quickly review our items. We have bag and boot, each of which have 4 copies in the deck and come 1 in each suit, including bird. We have coins, 3 copies in the deck and no bird suit for this one. Crossbow, 2 copies in the deck, 1 mouse, 1 bird. Root T, 3 copies, again no bird. Sword, 3 copies, no rabbit suit this time. And finally the hammer, for which there's only the single fox suited copy. Something interesting about crows that I've thought about, and I'm not the first person to suggest this, but I did see it floating around somewhere and I thought it was interesting. The idea of crafting items in a game with the Vagabond, and I don't have as much experience playing with the Lord of the Hundreds since Marauders is newer to me and I get fewer reps playing with the Lord of the Hundreds overall compared to Vagabond. This concept of crafting items in the mid game that other players usually would hesitate to craft, but because we're the Corvids, well, what we're doing is propping up the Vagabond to become more of a threat, right? And taking some of that heat away from ourselves and forcing the other players to go police the Vagabond, and we can't really do that, right? Because we only have our 3 actions. And so we can craft for points, which is great, prop up the Vagabond, make them a threat, and then shed all responsibility because we're pretty action starved as a faction. So it's just something to consider if you have factions that are going to be able to police the Vagabond. Obviously don't craft them a bunch of tea and swords if it's going to just make them run away with the game, but you know, something interesting to consider there. So now we can go and talk about our crafted improvements. First, false orders. 2 copies of false orders in the deck, costing 1 fox crafting piece. In Birdsong, may discard this card to move half of an enemy's warriors rounded up from any clearing as if you were that player, ignoring rule. We can craft false orders and use it on the same turn because the Corvids are the only faction that crafts in Birdsong, which is a very nice perk. There's a few other little interactions like this, but false orders is definitely the coolest one. We could even craft both copies in the same turn if we had 2 fox plots. This has been officially confirmed by Joshua Yearsley. So we could craft 1 false orders, then use it, and we're still in our crafting phase. So we could craft a second one, right? We can never have 2 copies of the same persistent effect, but we can craft, use, craft a second false orders if we happen to have both copies in our hand. We can move enemy warriors into a clearing with a plot and then flip that plot to resolve its effect on that enemy, right? You can move enemies into an extortion, or a bomb, or a snare. All three of those can have very nice effects for the Corvids. We can also do this little fun thing where we extort them first, and then in our daylight we trick in a snare. So we take their card and then we trap their warriors in the clearing and force them to try and battle their way out. And of course bomb them like I said. And then we have easier cardboard in the late game hunt. That's just a general all-purpose use for false orders that any faction can take advantage of, but it's particularly relevant for us because we are going to have a hard time closing that gap between 25 and 30 victory points. Master Engravers, 1 copy in the deck, costing 2 mouse crafting pieces. Whenever you craft an item, score 1 extra point. We desperately need extra points. Our plots are easy to remove from the map if our opponents don't want to afford us the opportunity to craft a 3-point T. They won't, so that's just something to note about crafting that Master Engravers. To make the best use of this improvement, we should probably skip Exert because we're going to want to continue drawing cards to cycle chances of drawing more items. And if we Exert, we don't draw cards in Evening, which doesn't synergize well with this crafted improvement. Urine Broker, 1 copy in the deck, also 2 mouse cost. Whenever another player crafts an item, draw a card. More cards are good since we'll need to craft some items and we can use them to recruit as well. It can allow us to exert more freely. It can take a bit of the pressure off of having extortions out, and it can allow us to take that 4th action from exert more often. But other than that, there's not like anything special. Like we're not like the moles where cards are gonna allow us more flexibility with swaying, and we're not like lizards where cards are gonna need more actions. It's just kind of nice to have. This isn't like a crazy craft. I wouldn't go after it unless we already have the 2 mouse plots on the board, and it's like, okay, yeah, sure, why not? League of Adventurous Mice, 2 copies in the deck, costing 1 mouse crafting piece. Once in daylight, may exhaust an item in your crafted items box to take a move or initiate a battle. We need extra actions and we'll be crafting items whenever possible, so this card is perfect for us. We don't need to exert as frequently again because we're going to be taking these extra actions using our items instead of that exert step. We can even do both sometimes, and that's going to allow us to draw more item cards, which we can craft to get more League of Adventurous Mice actions. Corvid Planners, 1 copy in the deck, 2 of any crafting piece. While moving, you ignore rule. We already do this. Corvid's already in the name, not really a big surprise. If we have nothing else to craft this turn and a full hand, maybe we could craft it to prevent a faction like Woodland Alliance from getting it. I'm still not sure how big counter crafting is in general, but just an idea that might come up in a very specific scenario. Swap Meet, 2 copies in the deck, costing 1 bunny crafting piece. Once in Birdsong, may take a random card from another player and give them a card. So this is going to give us an extra chance at getting items or improvements that we want, as well as a suit that we might want to recruit with. If we want to protect a plot, we shouldn't return cards matching that card's suit because there is a chance that that card that we took from them, maybe that did match the suit and now they have nothing left to expose, or maybe they never had one to begin with and we definitely want to make sure we don't give them one back. We can also use this the same turn we craft it, which is unique to Corvids because this effect is once in Birdsong, and we craft in Birdsong. We can extort before activating to increase our chances of getting the quote-unquote good card, right? So we take 1 random card first with extort, then we take a 2nd random card with Swap Me, and then give them one of our own cards back, of course. Eerie Emigre, 1 copy in the deck, costing 2 fox crafting pieces. At the end of Birdsong, take a move, then initiate a battle in the clearing you moved into. If you did not take both actions, discard this card. So our 3 normal standard Corvid actions are going to become 5 because this gives us access to a move and a battle. If this isn't our starting hand, we're going to want to prioritize this card and craft it as soon as possible. We can use it on the same turn as we craft it, thanks to Birdsong Crafting. We can't use it turn 1 because we only start with 1 plot, but we can use it as early as turn 2, which is really nice. This is going to allow us to police and keep on scoring at the same time, right? Normally Corvids can't really afford to police too much because they're focused on plotting a bunch and maybe picking off some undefended cardboard along the way. And this is going to absolve us of blame for said policing because, you know, if we don't use the Eerie Emigre card, take the move and battle that's required of it, we're going to have to discard it. I wanted to take a second to say if you're enjoying the video so far or if you're finding it helpful or maybe even both, just to please leave a like on the video so that YouTube knows to show it to more people who like Root. Thanks a lot. Charm Offensive, 1 copy in the deck, costing 1 bunny crafting piece. At the start of evening, may draw a card and choose another player to score 1 point. So this is going to replace a second extortion plot, making our plots hard to expose, right? Because we have 2 of each type of plot. If we have 2 extortions out, that's great. We get 3 cards per turn in evening, but that makes our plots even easier to expose because the player exposing knows that it can never be an extortion. We will take any bargaining chip we can get, and by that I mean that point that we have to give to another player. We can maybe use that to leverage some favor from someone at some point. Not sure how effective that is, but again, we're going to be really struggling to close that gap in the later game, and so anything that we can do in the early game to set us up for that is going to be useful. Partisans, 3 copies in the deck, 1 of each suit. In battle, in clearings of this suit, may deal 1 extra hit, then discard all of your cards except ones matching this suit. Battles are costly, but they're going to be necessary for us to close out the game. We need that cardboard. Any way to reduce the number of battles we need to take to remove cardboard is great, so Partisans are going to be an incredible craft for us. Partisans and Embedded Agents are going to combine on defense to make plots incredibly annoying for our opponents to remove via battle. And of course they do still have the exposure avenue, but this can make it so that we can afford to more lightly defend our plots, which we're probably going to be doing anyway, but this just makes trying to remove those lightly defended cardboard of our plots a little bit more annoying for our opponents. We spend any relevant cards in Birdsong on crafting and recruiting, so if we discard the other ones, it's not that big of a deal. Of course, on defense, that's another story, but on offense, it doesn't matter, right? If we had a relevant card, it was already used to craft or recruit, most likely. Informants, 2 copies in the deck, costing 2 fox crafting pieces. In evening, if you would draw cards, you may instead take 1 ambush card from the discard pile. This is useful for preparing our game-closing cardboard crawl, as I'm calling it. Protect a specific suit that we want to craft with in the next Birdsong, right? So we want to craft Root T next turn. We need to make sure we have at least 1 mouse plot on the board. They can't expose it because it's face up. They're going to have to battle it. We can draw that mouse ambush. Everyone will see that we took that mouse ambush from the discard pile, or even better, a bird ambush. And then the knowledge of that ambush will dissuade them from attacking in the first place. But if they do, we of course get to remove those 2 warriors immediately upon the start of the battle. This is a why not craft, like Urine Broker, if we've already committed to 2 fox plots for Eerie Emigre and crafting swords. Tunnels, 2 copies in the deck, costing 1 rabbit crafting piece. You treat clearings with any of your crafting pieces as adjacent. This can be used to give us outposts, so we're going to defend plots as outposts on opposite sides of the map to move between, and that'll make consolidating to plot a little bit easier. So, you know, I think Corvids get more use out of this than your average faction, but it's still nothing like insane, right? No faction gets like an insane utility out of tunnels. It's just like, okay, that's kind of a cool thing. So I put this in the why not category again. If we're in a card surplus and we have the plot to craft it, sure, why not? And it should be noted that it does not work with Raid's removal effect. This is because the Raid is no longer on the board once it's removed, and therefore no longer a crafting piece, so Tunnels is no longer in effect. So we can't spread warriors to other clearings with plots that aren't normally adjacent to that clearing because the raid no longer works with tunnels because it's no longer a crafting piece. Boat builders, 1 copy in the deck, costing 2 of any suited crafting piece. You treat rivers as paths. This gives us more adjacent clearings for raids, and it's great for consolidating warriors to plot. Any movement option is going to be great for consolidating warriors to plot. This allows us to bypass choke points on the winter and lake maps. We can travel from the bottom left to the top right corner on the mountain map in 2 moves, right? There's only 3 river clearings on that map. Propaganda Bureau, 1 copy in the deck, costing 3 crafting pieces of any suit. Once in daylight, may spend a card to remove an enemy warrior from a matching clearing and place a warrior there. This is going to be useful for picking off cardboard, and we really need that cardboard to close the game. Have I hammered this home enough? We really, really need that cardboard. We likely have a few leftover cards thanks to failed exposure attempts and extortion draw bonuses, so we can then spend one of those cards per turn on Propaganda Bureau, get another Corvid on the board, which is nice for plotting, and also nice for picking off that cardboard. Coffin Makers, 1 copy in the deck, costing 2 rabbit crafting pieces. Whenever any warriors would return to a supply, place them on this card instead. At the start of Birdsong, you score 1 point per 5 warriors here, then return all warriors here to their supplies. So all warriors that are removed to plot will go straight to the coffin, so this synergizes well with our main scoring mechanism. Plotting twice in a turn has the added benefit of virtually guaranteeing at least 1 coffin point, right? Because we are putting 3 of our own crows in the coffin on our turn. The odds that at least 2 warriors are removed from the board between the end of your turn and the start of the next one is incredibly high. And that's assuming you don't take a battle with that 3rd action or something. Soup kitchens, 1 copy, costing 1 of each suited crafting piece. Your tokens now count toward rule, and each of your tokens counts twice. This could maybe be a why not craft, but honestly the flexibility of choosing which suit to recruit with, because it's bird suited, is almost always better. So I'm sorry Soup Kitchens, but I think this is just going to be another, yeah, probably don't craft this one scenario for you. Saboteurs, 3 copies in the deck, costing 1 crafting piece of any suit. At the start of Birdsong, may discard this card to discard an enemy's crafted card. This is going to be great for defending our numerous crafted improvements, right? If we already have Saboteurs out, then it is going to be very difficult for anyone to saboteur any of our cards, because the instant they craft their Saboteurs, we can saboteur their Saboteurs, thus making it so they can't get rid of any of our improvements. Of course, there is that 3rd copy and the reshuffling of the deck, but it at least gives us more time with those cards. Coffin Makers is going to take advantage of our plot mechanic, so we want to saboteur opponents' Coffin Makers whenever we can, but of course still use discretion, right? We want to choose our sabo target based on the game state. Don't just blindly sabo Coffin Makers if the person in a dead last crafts it, like they're not even close to the rest of the pack. Don't craft it just because you know Coffin Makers is strong. You have to assess how that card is actually going to affect the faction's game, right? Wooden Alliance crafts Propaganda Bureau, but they're at 3 points and everyone else is at 20. Yeah, probably not going to need to saboteur that, right? And you can save it for something else, like a critical Partisans that might help a faction clean up the game with the last few rolls they need, you know? Some cards can be unassuming, but they're important to consider saboteuring all the same because it's all about the game state. And I believe that is the end of this Corvid crafting guide. Probably my fastest one. I talked a bit faster than I normally do, I guess. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed watching. I got plenty of other ones and more to come in the future, so hope you enjoy those as well, and I'll see you in the next video.